Good morning. Today is long day number 2. Lots of lab time. I'm basically going to be spending from 9 to 9 at school, come home, shower, eat, shower, get ready for the premiere of Harry Potter, which a bunch of us are going to in SAC. And it's going to be awesome and hard, which means I can finally break out this, my Slytherin tie. Awesomeness to the extreme. But yeah, I was actually told that the only way I can get a ride out there is to dress up. And it's the premiere, I'm gonna dress up anyways. But it's gonna be amazing. She's only gonna be recording before and after, which means this video isn't really gonna go up until tomorrow afternoon. Oh my god, after I've filmed most of Friday. But I'm gonna be dead tomorrow. I'm already kind of dead because we watched Human Target last night. Awesome show. Oh, I really wish that I had seen all of the season, but for some reason it didn't record. I thought it had just stopped. Nope. It continued, and it made me sad. It was probably because it was just for that channel. It picked up on a different channel. That's why. Oh, speaking of which, I should tell Chris. Definitely a 2-part video today. Just a heads up. Unless they don't allow me to film what's going on inside the meat factory. So for those of you who are kind of squeamish, you might want to skip most of today's videos, because they're going to be done in the meat lab. We're going to see carcasses, but we are going to make some ice cream. That'll be good. I don't know if that's first or second, but we'll see. I gotta get ready. Stupid school. That's a big carcass. Couple more. Oh, that looks tasty.
Is everybody in? Can you guys pull the door closed a little bit behind you, but not all the way shut? Try to keep it going on. We are eating this as we speak. Okay, so we have over here 2 halves of a carcass. We've got the half from a steer is on this side, and this one's a little bit older. It's maturity A. Maturity A is the lowest maturity, or the youngest. And in order to be rated as maturity A, it has to be less than 30 months old. Maturity D is the cow on the other side, and she is about 3 or 4 years old at the time of slaughter. And there's a couple things that you might notice that it talks about the back fat in inches, okay? That's the measure of the thickness of the fat. They have the ribeye area, so part of the actual quality grading and the yield grading is determining how much muscle is actually on this animal. So the ribeye area is part of the yield grading, and that's actually measured in part by the square inches that make up the ribeye, okay? And you guys can see the ribeye is covered with a little piece of saran wrap on the top right there. The kidney, pelvis, heart fat is the next one where it says 2%. The hot carcass weight is right when they measured it before it came in here, before it cooled down. the yield grade, the lower the number, the better the score. Okay? Because you want to have a closer ratio between the hot carcass weight and the live weight. A bigger number means that there's a bigger discrepancy, which means the rumen was full, it had a lot of blood, there's a lot of fat in around the viscera, which isn't usable. Okay, so all those things that decrease the carcass weight from the live weight kind of decrease the grade of the animal. The marbling on these are not very good, but you can see this little diagram here that talks about the different levels of marbling. Prime is the highest grade, and you have choice, and you have select. Below that you have utility and like inner. And those are usually not, those don't go into human consumption. The lowest you'll get is probably select. I never understood why they called it Safeway Select. That's not a good thing. It's still edible, but it just means it's probably not as edible. You can see that there's a couple of blue stamps. The stamps are from the USDA inspector, and those are actually stamps on the wholesale cuts. So you might actually be able to see all the pieces as they're actually cut down here, although sometimes you'd actually have to flip it over to get to that. Usually the animals are hung to age them for 14 days, but they can be aged for much longer. And the reason you age them is because the enzymes that are naturally present in the tissue start to be released by the cells, and as they're released, they start to break down the tissue, and that's what gives aged meat a really tender and much higher quality flavor, I guess you could say, because it's actually breaking it down. The other thing that is interesting to point out is that as the animals get older, the vertebrae start to fuse in the sacrum, so that's very low down in the back. And you can see, can I squeeze through here? You can see on this cow here, she has fused vertebrae up here, but if you look on the steer, there is actually a gap of a couple millimeters between each of the vertebrae. Another thing is, if you look up here, you can actually see the T-bone. Like I said, this is the ribeye is basically part of the T-bone, but you can see that that notch that's in the top of the T is caused by where the spinal cord used to be. Okay, it's not there anymore. And if you guys just take a look at some of the different locations, basically where the meat is actually coming from, this animal could still be broken down. These pieces, these whole sometimes can be broken down even further and still be sold. Okay, but don't be afraid to touch it. It's not going to go bad. You can see here that even though this pig has had his hair removed, it's like little needles. Okay, it's really rough. But that's because it's under the surface of the skin and there's just a little bit poking out because the skin is dehydrating, but the hair is still sticking out. And as I mentioned earlier, there's this thing called leaf fat, and that's what this is. This little leaf is basically what increases the weight of the carcass by just a little bit every time. And you can see the kidney in there too. How's it going? Okay.
I just want to let you know we're about almost done.
Okay, what time is it?
It's almost noon.
Almost noon. I have until 12:30, right?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to know if you want us to leave out the cheese and milk and everything. Okay.
So you can see the leaf fat and the kidney in here, and that's sometimes also used just if you want to check. They'll cut open the kidney. You can see that there's like a little cut in there to check to make sure that the kidneys are healthy. There's no kind of like scarring or anything like that. Another thing that you guys should probably know about is the difference between a lamb and a sheep. Where do you draw the line? What is lamb and what is sheep? Because most people don't want to buy mutton. They want to buy lamb. So there's one way that is the technical requirement, I guess you could say. So there's 4 joints basically on any animal that resemble like the elbow, basically, and or the knee. And as an animal gets older, like you saw in the sacral vertebra on the older cattle, the cartilage kind of starts to fuse and sometimes turns into solid bone. So in this case, the cartilage at the end of the joint is fused with the rest of the bone. cartilage broke off. And if the cartilage breaks off, that means it's younger. Okay? So this is called a break joint, where you can see the ends of the bone, but the cartilage is actually gone. It's actually missing. Now, the opposite can be said if the animal, keep my head on. If the animal is older and the cartilage fuses, then you try to break it off and it won't break off. And that's called a spool joint, S-P-O-O-L. And it's because it looks like a spool that you could wind thread on. And you can see one of them right here. Okay? Now, in order for this to be considered a lamb and not sheep, I believe that at least one of the joints has to break like this. Now, this animal is a little bit older and technically would have been a sheep, but the person who slaughtered it made sure that we could see the difference between a break joint and a spool joint, so it kind of just like dried it off. Okay? So it was kind of right at the border, probably would have been considered mutton, but he broke it off so that we could see what it would look like otherwise. So break joint and spool joint. You should know the difference between those two. And then you can see all the different parts. One thing that I think you guys should know is the shank of an animal is basically the part of the arm that attaches to the body. And I just think it's cool part to know. It makes it really tasty. Lamb stew. But you can get beef shank or pig shank, I guess. And it's cool work. I like the word shank. Yeah, go ahead and take a look and see what you learn about where your meat's coming from. Another interesting thing is the flank steak. This is the flank steak right here. It's a really long muscle and it's not very thick. It's actually really thin. Flank steak actually comes from the diaphragm, the muscle that helps you draw air into your lungs. Okay, so that's what the flank steak actually comes from. It's that diaphragm that separates the peritoneal cavity and the thoracic cavity. So the top part where your lungs and your heart is, from the bottom part where your stomach, your liver, and your intestines are. Okay, that's what that's.
This is what your meat looks like before you cook it. Still looks tasty. I still can't believe how big this thing is. That's a big rack of ribs. Ugh. It's freezing in there. Below 38. Oh boy.